How do you prevent mass panic? Doctors faked standard medical exams. Victims expected a routine checkup. They received a sudden bullet. Illusions hid the fatal mechanism. Steel medical instruments clanked loudly. This metallic noise provided cover. Guards measured the target's height. A wooden scale hid the shooter. Genickschuss. The neck shot struck instantly. Bone shattered in 1 millisecond. Executioners avoided all eye contact. They stayed hidden. This protocol took years to develop. The year was 1933. Leaders demanded strict nationwide control. Open executions caused public unrest. Commanders required quieter killing procedures. They needed stealth. Changes arrived by the late 1930s. Security officers analyzed covert shooting angles. The hidden method succeeded. The design worked. No warnings happened. Security forces fully integrated this hidden execution protocol into the local police arsenal just before the war began. Heinrich Himmler stood over an open trench near Minsk in 1941. The chief architect of state terror could not endure the raw sight of blood. By that autumn, SS commanders documented severe operational failures, noting executioners could not tolerate continuous visual contact with thousands of targets. During an inspection of Einsatz Group B, brain tissue stained his overcoat and provoked a physiological reaction that forced him away. Psychological degradation extended rapidly across multiple deployment sectors. Officers submitted detailed formal reports concerning severe mental deterioration among soldiers executing point-blank duties. Consequently, frontline commanders submitted massive requisitions for supplementary schnapps rations to offset the trauma. Daily alcohol consumption became the primary chemical tool utilized to maintain squad compliance. Despite these heavy rations, instances of insubordination and nervous breakdowns multiplied among the personnel. Headquarters evaluated this statistical decline in efficiency as a critical operational threat. The leadership initiated a comprehensive procedural review to stabilize the mental condition of their own security forces. Consideration for the targeted demographics remained absent from the internal memoranda. Open infantry tactics generated excessive psychiatric casualties among the designated SS shooters. A physical barrier separating the perpetrator from the dying process became a strict necessity. Command ordered a new method. How do you hide over 33,000 corpses in 48 hours? Einsatzgruppen units marched civilians directly into the forests around Babi Yar. Himmler faced a logistical failure. Daily execution tallies reached limits that defied physical concealment. Bodies piled up faster than troops could bury them. Reinhard Heydrich directed this initial wave of terror. Command deployed Einsatzgruppen A, B, C, and D right behind advancing military fronts. They bypassed combat zones. SS officers hunted unarmed populations across occupied territories. The process of open execution required heavy physical labor. Columns of civilians walked miles into remote ravines. Shooters stood directly at the trench edge. They fired point blank. The continuous crack of hundreds of Mauser rifles echoed for kilometers. The air offered no concealment. Blood saturated the topsoil. The procedure remained chaotic and exposed. In September 1941, the scale broke the method. The operation erased the equivalent of a medium European town in exactly 48 hours. Victims were forced to manually excavate their own burial trenches in the mud before taking a bullet. The final body count in Kyiv over 2 days reached 33,000, 61,000 targeted names. On September 1, 1939, SD intelligence units invaded Poland holding these exact documents. The subsequent chaotic forest massacres evolved directly from this initial, cold, bureaucratic planning. Security police directors designed the initial liquidation protocols exclusively for the national elite. The Master Directory carried the official operational title, Sonderfahndungsbuch Poland. It categorized the verified identities of citizens who possessed direct societal influence. Field officers systematically flipped through printed pages listing exact residential addresses of local teachers and parish priests. Commanders calculated that eliminating these specific individuals would permanently neutralize any organized civilian resistance. Within weeks of the invasion, Gestapo detachments executed synchronized arrest operations across Warsaw, Krakow, and Poznan. The initial targeted apprehension process rapidly escalated far beyond the original meticulously typed parameters. Transport vehicles moved the designated individuals from urban holding cells to undisclosed locations. The arrested Polish leaders disappeared into classified detention facilities without leaving any official record. How do you isolate the executioner from the victim? The process moved indoors. The chaotic woodland massacres had reached a psychological breaking point. Senior commanders observed the open-air killings. The resulting mental strain among the troops triggered a structural shift. The protocol now demanded strict resource management. Exactly 1 bullet per person. The 1940s brought a complete redesign of the execution sequence. Guards escorted the prisoner into a specialized room. Heavy tiled walls surrounded them. The ceramic surfaces absorbed the sharp acoustic wave of the gunshot. The escort fixed the target against the wall. The executioner waited behind the barrier in total silence. An officer fired a single round through a concealed aperture. The technique, known as Genickschuss, severed the cervical spine instantly. The SS methodically divided labor. In these new facilities, the shooter never saw the victim's face. Open field firing squads faced severe technical constraints. Panic disrupted schedules. The camp network solved this problem. Sachsenhausen pioneered these isolated structures near Berlin. The architectural blueprints spread rapidly. Concrete floors featured specialized drains to manage blood flow. Execution blocks became standard infrastructure. Guards tested the modified execution procedures deep inside Auschwitz and Buchenwald. How to execute without a scream. SS officers found the answer. They built a medical illusion. Forest trenches caused too much chaos. Mass graves disrupted daily camp operations. The process required total control. So engineers designed Station Z. The location was Sachsenhausen concentration camp, just 35 kilometers north from Berlin. This happened in 1942. Planners rejected open-air executions. Architecture served one strict central logic: invisible extermination. Panic destroys daily operational efficiency. Fear triggers sudden physical resistance. Screams alert the outside holding pens. The SS needed calm, compliant victims. They constructed a fake medical clinic. Prisoners entered a brightly lit room. The walls looked perfectly sterile. Men expected a routine physical check. Doctors wore standard white medical coats. A tall height measure stood there. It rested against a thick wall. It looked entirely harmless. The wooden measuring device hid a trap. A hidden hole pierced the flat panel. It concealed a dark steel pistol barrel. The executioner stood behind the false wall. He remained invisible. Guards carried standard-issue military weapons, usually a Luger P-08 or a Walther P-38. Both fired standard 9mm rounds. Their narrow dimensions fit the gap. The metal barrel barely cleared the wood. The shooter ignored the victim's face. Victims step up to the wooden scale. They place their bare heels together. They stand straight. They wait for the routine height measurement. The hidden guard aligns his weapon. He aims through the narrow vertical slit. A muffled click sounds behind the wood. A heavy, sharp crack echoes inside. One single shot. The bullet strikes the lower human brainstem. It severs the medulla oblongata tissue. Instant physiological electrical shutdown. The heart stops. The victim drops instantly to the floor. No scream escapes their throat. Blood pools on the gray concrete floor. Sonderkommando forced labor prisoners rush inside. They drag the lifeless corpse away, washing the cold tiles with pressurized water hoses, while the pristine medical room is meticulously prepped for the next incoming patient. 1 bullet, 1 guard. The hidden rooms functioned on strict anatomical principles. The entire layout relied on striking a single biological target at the base of the skull. This specific cranial coordinate houses the brainstem. It directly controls respiration and cardiac rhythm. A standard 9mm projectile weighs approximately 8 grams. Fired from close range, it travels at 365 meters per second. It fractures the occipital bone. The bullet instantly severs the brainstem. Breathing halts. Blood pressure drops to zero. Motor functions cease before the cortex processes physical trauma. The subject collapses immediately without displaying reflex movements. The vocal cords paralyze. No scream escapes the lungs. The only sound is the heavy thud of dead weight hitting the floor tiles. The execution remains physically contained. Panic does not spread to adjacent waiting areas. Soviet prisoners of war faced this protocol first. Following the invasion in June 1941, thousands of captured soldiers arrived at the camps. Security officers classified these men as immediate threats. Traditional outdoor firing squads generated excessive noise. They drained ammunition and strained camp manpower. The cervical shot provided a sterile alternative. Prisoners expected a routine intake medical exam. A lone operator behind the wooden panel pulled the trigger. The instant biological shutdown erased the need for a designated firing squad. Synchronized volleys disappeared. For a single execution, the protocol required exactly one cartridge. Why did camp commandants ultimately abandon the standard firing squad? The reinforced barricade at Auschwitz demonstrated every logistical failure associated with open terror operations. While facility technicians at Sachsenhausen refined their precise neck-shot mechanics, the administrative staff at Auschwitz would initially maintain their reliance on conventional mass executions. The camp infrastructure originally required visible demonstrations of lethal force to maintain strict disciplinary control over the rapidly expanding inmate population. The camp command centralized these authorized killings within the heavily guarded perimeter of Block 11. Inmates classified this secure brick structure simply as the death block. The subterranean levels contained entirely unlit, cramped concrete cells where condemned individuals awaited processing without any provision of food or water. Guards routinely escorted groups of captured Polish resistance members and targeted political hostages into the adjacent exterior space. The execution personnel positioned these prisoners directly against the reinforced exterior barrier, internally designated as the Black Wall. The appointed detachments discharged their standard-issue Karabiner 98 Kurz service rifles at close range. The sharp acoustic wave of the synchronized volleys resonated loudly across the narrow courtyard trapped between Block 10 and Block 11. Traditional firing squads rapidly became an unsustainable logistical liability for the Central Command. The distinct auditory footprint of daily gunfire fractured the daily routine of the surrounding facilities. Prolonged exposure to visible violence generated severe psychological friction among the guard units tasked with continuous killing duties. The execution protocol required excessive manpower allocations simply to process relatively small batches of targeted individuals. The High Command demanded a streamlined procedure that removed the visual chaos and the loud acoustic signature of an open execution yard. The Auschwitz camp administration officially implemented fully isolated execution facilities, disguised directly as standard medical examination rooms. Heinrich Himmler and Reinhard Heydrich evaluated the Eastern European deportation schedules. The disguised medical rooms operated without interruptions, but the perfected neck shot still proved too slow. The rising numbers demanded a faster tactical procedure. 4 fixed steps defined the isolated routine. Guards escorted the prisoner inside. Personnel positioned the target against the wooden height measure. The executioner fired a single 9mm round. Prisoner detachments removed the corpse. Repeat. A single shooter performed this exact cycle hundreds of times per shift. But the speed of one execution chamber hit a physiological wall. Recoil management tired the wrist. Trigger finger fatigue compromised the required accuracy of the executioner. Blood accumulation on the concrete floor delayed the manual removal teams. Floor decontamination required buckets and mops, costing precious minutes. A shooter could only eliminate one person per cartridge. By 1941 and 1942, The SS High Command initiated the final solution. The SS expanded operations deep into Soviet territories. Officers reviewed the daily transport manifests from the ghettos. The physical gap between arriving train loads and local execution rates widened daily. Command evaluated the eliminations exclusively through the metric of maximum throughput. The firing squads failed to meet the quotas. Commanders demanded a procedure that did not rely on human stamina. SS planners calculated the logistics for liquidating 11 million European Jews. The individual execution method exhausted its physical limit. Why keep hidden height measuring rooms? Mass gas chambers already existed. The SS demanded total control. Every liquidation tier mattered. Tin cans of Zyklon B rattled. 9mm cartridges sat nearby. Guards herded thousands of arrivals. They walked toward fake showers. Disinfectant smell filled the corridors. The sharp odor masked reality. Victims stripped. Doors locked. Zyklon B pellets dropped inside. Hundreds suffocated. At Auschwitz-Birkenau, death took minutes. Treblinka ran the same process. Sobibor copied the sequence. Transports died, but the neck shot remained. It served specific operational goals. Guards isolated a political prisoner. They walked him next door. The sign read medical examination. A guard adjusted the measuring rod. The actual goal was execution. The two tracks ran simultaneously. Auschwitz-Birkenau spanned 171 hectares. This footprint provided structural cover. Massive crematoria roared continuously. Industrial noise hid the gunshots. Small execution rooms operated quietly. They processed captured resistance members. Informants vanished. The gas destroyed entire populations. The bullet eliminated specific threats. One method handled bulk volume. The other offered pinpoint precision. SS commanders maintained ultimate flexibility. Large groups required zero relocation. Isolated targets fell silently. While heavy transport trains delivered thousands into the underground gas chambers, individual prisoners took a bullet. Two methods, one goal. In 1943, Heinrich Himmler implemented a strict operational chain. They were not born sadists. Ordinary personnel conducted executions because the command fragmented the procedure into isolated technical operations. The sequence demanded rigid handoffs. One guard escorted the prisoner down the corridor. Heavy leather boots echoed against the concrete floor during the transfer. Another guard took physical custody at the door and positioned the target against the wall. A third operative pressed a 9mm pistol to the neck and fired. No single officer processed a victim from the holding cell to the body pit. This division of labor functioned as a psychological shield. The execution roster mixed elite SS units with standard order police. These order police, known as ORPO, consisted of regular municipal patrolmen. Before the war, they directed traffic and managed civilian disputes. By 1940, their battalions numbered over 300,000 men across the territories. They had families. They followed daily municipal routines. The transition to executioners required a structural buffer. The command recognized the mental strain of direct, continuous killing. The physical separation of stages solved this operational bottleneck. One operative fetched the target. Another operative aligned the target. A third operative pulled the trigger. A completely different squad handled the removal of the corpse. They scrubbed the concrete and prepared the room for the next entry. The segmented protocol removed personal accountability. Each man executed a narrow, repetitive task. Himmler demanded total obedience, filtering targets through specific operational categories. The administration labeled targets as security threats to justify the elimination orders. The fragmented method accelerated the elimination rate. The execution framework reached maximum capacity across multiple zones. The division of labor maintained operational speed without breaking the personnel. Target rosters arrived from headquarters every morning. Camp administrators distributed execution quotas across different security shifts. In 1944, the facility completed these fragmented executions on a continuous daily schedule. How to hide evidence from Soviet and American armies? Guards drove exhausted prisoners into the cold. Thousands perished within weeks. In 1944, routines worked. In early 1945, they fractured. Soviets pushed west. American and British units moved east. The SS started panic evacuations. Camps dissolved. Inmates walked in thin uniforms. In January 1945, Poland froze. Temperatures hit -20 degrees Celsius. Core heat plummeted. Tissue failed. Exhaustion stopped motor functions. Muscles locked. Movement ceased. Escorts executed final orders. Guards shot stragglers directly in the snow. Paper burns. Inside Sachsenhausen and Auschwitz, SS personnel dismantle the vertical height measuring stadiometers. They throw thick registration ledgers directly into the open flames. Those specific SS guards who failed to retreat west remained behind. They stayed to methodically incinerate all operational documentation inside the camp perimeters. Officers dismantled the covert execution infrastructure inside Station Z piece by piece. They carefully unscrewed the calibrated measuring fixtures from the execution walls. Personnel then manually pulled apart the blood-stained brickwork behind the firing apparatus. The sharp smell of burnt paper from the destroyed Gestapo archives hung heavy in the freezing air. They worked rapidly to eliminate all physical traces of the concealed firing stations. Right up until the final operational days, officers utilized the clinical examination pretext. Guards directed incoming Soviet prisoners of war into the designated measuring rooms. They maintained the strict guise of routine health inspections and anthropometric documentation. Between 1941 and 1943, Auschwitz personnel targeted specific political prisoners. Executioners processed these victims through the exact same physical installations without generating a paper trail. During the Eastern Campaign of 1941, German forces captured over 3 million Soviet soldiers. A significant percentage of these captives vanished without any official administrative trace. Gestapo units applied this close-range neck-shooting procedure across various occupied territories to eliminate priority targets. This decentralized operational approach created a permanent statistical void in the official death records. Small regional prisons throughout Poland and the Soviet Union processed victims quietly. Officers conducted these rapid liquidations without maintaining the standard administrative paperwork. Investigators attempting to reconstruct the complete data face an intentional administrative blackout. Surviving physical evidence indicates a massive discrepancy between official camp registers and the actual body count. The deliberate destruction of the execution instruments and regional archives masked the true dimensions of this methodology. The resulting gap in the records accounts for hundreds of thousands of permanently erased names. 7,000 emaciated prisoners remained in the barracks of Auschwitz. Incinerated archives failed to conceal ballistic impact marks. Soviet advance units of the 60th Army breached the perimeter in January 1945. The temperature hit -20 degrees Celsius. The Auschwitz complex covered 40 square kilometers. Physically erasing a perimeter of that scale before retreating was impossible. Dead silence filled the abandoned storage warehouses. Wooden crates overflowed with items confiscated from the executed. Military forensic teams initiated immediate documentation. Investigators photographed bullet trajectories embedded in the brickwork. They measured execution chambers and drafted detailed forensic reports. Officers logged calculations. Guards secured the area. The camp layout dictated its own spatial logic. The survivors provided the operational blueprints. They dictated sworn testimonies. Witnesses outlined the covert transportation routes. They explained the exact operation of the neck-shooting installations. The Gestapo concealment strategy collapsed under this cross-referenced data. By April 1945, forensic methodology reached Sachsenhausen. Soviet troops located the firing apparatus hidden inside Station Z. Military engineers dismantled the device for technical analysis. Military prosecutors sealed the complete ballistic workflow into official records. Who bore responsibility for these executions? In November 1945, the ballistic evidence from Auschwitz materialized on the prosecution desks at the Nuremberg Tribunal. International prosecutors processed the commanding officers who directed the extermination facilities. Senior command figures incurred capital sentences or prolonged incarceration for deploying these mass casualty protocols. Allied investigators opened dossiers on more than 100,000 German personnel following the cessation of hostilities in May 1945. However, post-war authorities converted only a minor fraction of these files into formal prison sentences. The lower-tier facility technicians and rank-and-file sentries executed a different survival protocol. Former execution operators acquired modified civilian registration documents and assimilated into the municipal workforces. These frontline shooters deactivated their operational histories, neutralizing any forensic connection to the concealed firing installations. Their calculated anonymity insulated them from the accountability metrics applied to the central command hierarchy. The physical hardware outlasted the post-war judicial scrutiny. Today, civilian visitors navigate the preserved concrete execution perimeters of Auschwitz and Sachsenhausen.